Hey, it's Medium Jenny Lee. I'm here with the next Raw book discussion. We're on session 34, which means this is video number 35. Let's get into it. All right, so they made it to March 4th, 1981. The instrument, Carla, would like to know if 2 short exercise periods a day would be better for her than 1 long one. Incorrect. The proper configuration of the physical complex exercising during the 3-month period wherein the instrument is vulnerable to physical complex distortion intensifications needs the strengthening of the physical complex. So remember, her vital energies are low for 3 months because she took some LSD from some Orion group person. Messed her up. This may appropriately be seen to be 1 major period of the exercising followed late in your diurnal cycle during the evening meditation by an exercise period approximately 1/2 the length of the first. This will be seen to be wearing upon the instrument. However, it will have the effect of strengthening the physical complex and lessening the vulnerability, which might be taken advantage of. Okay. So what? So Carla wanted to have 2 short exercise periods would be better than a long one. And Ross says that she should have 1 long exercise period in the morning and 1 that's half the length in the evening before she meditates. And it might seem like she's going to wear herself out, but really it's going to be strengthening her. So she'll be less vulnerable to be taken advantage of. All right, now they're going to get into the regular questions. You stated at an earlier time that penetration of the 8th level or the intelligent infinity level allows a mind-body-spirit complex to be harvested if it wishes at any time space during the cycle. When this penetration of the 8th level occurs, what does the entity who penetrates this level? What does the entity who penetrates this level? I think there might have been a word mess in there. The experience of each entity is unique in perception of intelligent infinity. Perceptions range from a limitless joy to a strong dedication to serve to others while in the incarnated state. The entity which reaches intelligent infinity most often will perceive this experience as one of unspeakable profundity. Another fun word. However, it is not usual for the entity to immediately desire the cessation of the incarnation. Rather, desire to communicate or use this experience to aid others is extremely strong. So, tapping into that 8th level of intelligent infinity can bring joy, make people want to have an even stronger dedication to others by wanting to share their experience about what happened with other people so it can help them. Goodness gracious, that was a loud bang upstairs. That makes sense. Is it possible for you to tell me what I experienced around 1964? I believe it was when in meditation I became aware of what I would consider to be a different density in a different planet and seemed to experience moving onto that planet. Is it possible for you to tell me what experience that was? Sounds pretty cool, Dawn. Hope it wasn't because you were doing some acid. Oh, sorry. We see some harm in full disclosure due to infringement. We content ourselves with suggesting that this entity, which is not readily able to subject itself to the process of hypnotic regression instigated by others, nevertheless has had its opportunity for understanding its beingness. So they can't tell him what really happened and what really went down. But there's something there that might be part of who he is. Could you define karma? Our understanding of karma is that which you may call inertia. I really like this. I think this is very helpful here to understand that it's inertia. Those actions which are put into motion will continue using the way of balancing until such a time as the controlling or higher principle which you may liken unto your breaking or stopping is invoked. This stoppage of the inertia of action may be called forgiveness. These 2 concepts are inseparable. When you look at it like this, it makes it so much easier to understand. the shit is just going to keep rolling downhill until you put the brakes on and you stop it, and you stop the cycle. And stopping the cycle is forgiveness. These two concepts are inseparable. Big, big information there. A lot of implications. Forgiveness isn't always easy, particularly when someone else has done something very terrible to you. But if you can fully, truly forgive, then the cycle of the bad has no other choice but to stop. I like it. I like it. If an entity develops what is called karma in an incarnation, is there then programming that sometimes occurs so that he will experience catalyst that will enable him to get to a point of forgiveness, thereby alleviating the karma? This is, in general, correct. However, both self and any involved other self made any time through the process of understanding, acceptance, and forgiveness ameliorate these patterns. So Don's wondering if there's like specific time, specific things that would have to happen in order for you to be able to forgive. And yes, usually, but at any time, the person or the people involved can understand, accept, and forgive, and it does the same thing. This is true at any point in an incarnative pattern. Thus, one who has set in motion any action may forgive itself and never again make that error. This also breaks or stops what you call karma. So we talked about when other people do bad stuff, but when you do something bad that you feel guilty about or ashamed of, or whether it was to somebody else or whether it was to yourself, you can do the same thing. You can understand why you did it. You can be an accepting of the fact that it happened, and then you can forgive it, and you'll never again make that same mistake. Big stuff. Big, big stuff. All right, can you give me an example of the self-unmanifested producing learning catalyst? Which, remember, self-unmanifested just means when you're not interacting with anybody else. We observed your interest in the catalyst of pain. This experience is most common among your entities. The pain may be of the physical complex. More often, it is of the mental and emotional complex. In some few cases, the pain is spiritual and complex nature. This creates a potential for learning. The lessons to be learned vary. Almost always, these lessons include patience, tolerance, and the ability for the light touch. So we can have all kinds of pain, physical, mental, emotional, and even spiritual. Almost always, these lessons include patience, tolerance, and the ability for the light touch. Lessons to be learned from pain. Very often, the catalyst for emotional pain, whether it be the death of the physical complex of one other self which is loved, or some other seeming loss which simply result in the opposite, in a bitterness, an impatience, a souring. This is catalyst which has gone awry. In these cases, then, there will be additional catalysts provided to offer the unmanifested self further opportunities for discovering the self as an all-sufficient creator containing all that there is and full of joy. So this part is talking about when someone you love dies. And it should be a lesson of patience, tolerance, and light touch. But a lot of times it ends up being bitterness, impatience, and souring. Why did that person have to leave? Why did that person have to die? Why couldn't it have been me instead? What if, how come, etc. When we do all of those things, we're setting ourselves up for having to go through even more hard lessons. But, sometimes it's hard not to feel those things when you lose someone you love. But the catalyst has gone awry. So then there's going to be more stuff you're going to have to go through so you can learn the same lesson. something to keep in mind. What do we call contagious diseases? Do what we call contagious diseases play any part in this process with respect to the unmanifested self? These so-called contagious diseases are those entities of second density which offer an opportunity for this type of catalyst. If this catalyst is unneeded, then these second density creatures, as you would call them, do not have an effect. In each of these generalizations, you may please note that there are anomalies so that we cannot speak to every circumstance, but only to the general run of the way things, or the way of things as you experience them. Notice my, okay. Let's repeat that one sentence. If the catalyst is unneeded, the contagious disease second density creatures will not have an effect. We're living through a pandemic right now. Still, most people want to pretend like it doesn't exist anymore, but it's still happening. There's still people dying, there's still people getting sick. It's still here. It's not going anywhere. And this would suggest that it was needed, which I saw immediately when it started happening, that this was needed. That the way we were doing stuff wasn't right. The way we were doing stuff wasn't working. We had gotten to this breaking point, and the pandemic alleviated and opened up and allowed for things to break free that needed to be broken. And we're still going to be finding out more of those things as time goes on, and we're still going to be feeling the effects of that for a very long time. But when it first happened, everybody was like, why can't things just go back to normal? Like, they're never going to be the same as they were before COVID. You guys can pretend all you want, but it's not. It's not. And that, in some ways, is a good thing, because there's a lot of things about the way we were living that weren't good. And maybe, just maybe, when we come out the other side, things will be better than they were. Is yet to be seen. What part do birth defects play in this process? This is a portion of the programming of the mind-body-spirit, the mind-body complex totality manifested in the mind-body-spirit of third density. These defects are planned as limitations which are part of the experience intended by the entity totality complex. This includes genetic predispositions, as you call them. So Ra's saying that any birth defects were chosen by the entity coming into the body ahead of time. That may be hard for some people to hear. Would you give the same example of information about the self in relation to the societal self? The unmanifested self may find its lessons, those which develop any of the energy influx centers of the mind-body-spirit complex. The societal and self interactions most often concentrate upon the second and third energy centers. Second would be sacral, third is solar plexus. Thus, those most active in attempting to remake or alter the society are those working from feelings of being correct personally or having answers which will put power in more correct configuration. This may be seen to be of a full travel from negative to positive in orientation. Either will activate these energy ray centers. Okay, so people using their sacral and solar plexus chakras, attempting to change the way society works because they feel like they know a way to do it better. And Ra's saying this may be seen to be going from negative to positive. That either way, it's gonna activate those energy centers. There are some few whose desires to aid society of the green ray nature or above. These entities, however, are few due to the understanding, may we say, of fourth ray, that universal love freely given is more to be desired than principalities, or even the rearrangement of peoples or political structures. So your heart chakra, people looking at society, trying to aid society through love, aren't necessarily wanting to change the way it works. Because universal love is freely given. All right. If an entity were to be strongly biased toward positive societal effects, what would this do to his yellow ray in the aura as opposed to an entity who wanted to create an empire of society and govern it with an iron fist? What would be the difference in the yellow ray activity of these two entities? Let us take two such positively oriented active souls no longer in your physical time space. The one known as Albert, which is not Albert Einstein, it's a different Albert we'll get into in a little bit, who went into a strange land and to it a barbaric society in order that it might heal. This entity was able to mobilize great amounts of energy and what you call money. This entity spent much green ray energy both as a healer and a lover of your instrument known as the organ, like literally the organ that you play. This entity's yellow ray was bright and crystallized by the efforts needed to produce the funds to promulgate its efforts. However, the green and blue rays were of a toweringly brilliant nature as well. The higher levels, as you call them, being activated, the lower, as you call them, energy points remain in a balanced, being quite bright. So this dude's pretty balanced out. Bright crystallized solar plexus, but very bright green and blue ray energies, heart and throat, and well balanced. The other entity is the entity Martin. This entity dealt in a great degree with rather negative orange ray and yellow ray vibratory patterns. However, this entity was able to keep open the green ray energy due to the severity of its testing. If anything, this entity may be seen to have polarized more towards the positive due to its fidelity to service to others in the face of great catalyst. So who are we talking about? Albert Schweitzer and Martin Luther King. Okay, so who the heck is Albert Schweitzer? I did not know. I had to look him up. Albert Schweitzer was born in 1875 and he died in 1965. He was a theologian, an organist, played the organ, a musicologist, a writer, a humanitarian, a philosopher, a physician, a Lutheran minister who challenged secular views of Jesus, and he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1952 for his philosophy, reverence of life. Dude did a lot of stuff. So he was a pretty well-balanced fella who used his well-balanced energies for good and did a lot of wonderful things that he wanted to do with his life. And then Martin Luther King is talking about how really there was some bad juju going on there, but because he wanted to help people so much that he ends up polarizing towards the positive because of his open heart. Which, Martin Luther King was an absolutely fantastic, wonderful man who did a lot of great things and got our country going in the right direction. But, there is the knowledge out there that, he did, cheat on his wife and stuff. Which, let's just say, we're all human. We all make mistakes. But reading this and hearing that he had some negative polarizations in the orange and yellow ray, which is your solar plexus and sacral chakras, that makes sense why he might have done such a thing. So, interesting examples here. Yeah. Okay, I thought that was correct. Okay, so next, Dawn wants to know, can you give me the same type of information with respect to the unmanifested self interacting with gadgets, toys, and inventions? In this particular instance, we again concentrate for the most part in the orange and yellow centers. In a negative sense, many of the gadgets among your people, what you call communication devices and other distractions, such as the less competitive games, may be seen to have the distortion of keeping the mind-body-spirit complex unactivated, so that the yellow and orange ray activity is much weakened, thus carefully decreasing the possibility of eventual green ray activation. So you gotta remember, this is 1981. There are no smartphones. They barely have a phone with buttons on it. And there's not really video games yet. There might be, I think, Atari. But when I read this, that's all I could think about was smartphones and video games. We use them as a distraction from the world around us. We get completely addicted to them. We want to be in them. We want to be spending our time doing it. And it's completely distracting us from love. We're never going to activate our green ray centers if we're constantly focused on these things instead of using them in moderation as something that's just a short amount of time, maybe self-care, have fun thing. But a lot of people get really, really sucked into them, and there's a lot of reasons behind that we don't necessarily need to go all into right now. But I'm sure some of you are thinking the same things that I'm thinking. Other of your gadgets may be seen to be tools whereby the entity explores the capability of its physical or mental complexes, and in some cases the spiritual complex, thus activating the orange ray in what you would call your team sports and in other gadgets such as modes of transportation. These may be seen to be ways of investigating the feelings of power, more especially power over others or group power over another group of other selves. So team sports. Team sports and transportation. Well, it makes it sound like they're awful things. Feelings of power over others or groups over other groups. But I think there's a lot of great things that come out of team sports, and definitely transportation too. But I guess in the beginning of this paragraph, Ra does kind of say that. Explores the capabilities of physical and mental complexes, and in some cases the spiritual complex, but definitely activating the orange ray. All right, what overall effect of television on our society with respect to this catalyst? Without ignoring the green ray attempts of many to communicate via this medium, such information, truth, and beauty as may be helpful, we must suggest that the sum effect of this gadget is that of distraction and sleep. So there's plenty of great, wonderful things out there that's on television that's going to help us a lot, move through and aid us. Information, truth, and beauty. I always think of Mr. Rogers when I think of people who are trying to make television something that would be beneficial for all. But the majority of it is distraction and sleep. Like, I don't think physical sleep, but like mental sleep. Okay. Now with respect to the relationship of war and rumors of war. You may see this in relationship to your gadgets. The war and self relationship is a this, I hate this, is a fundamental perception of the maturing entity. There's a great chance to accelerate in whatever direction is desired. One may polarize negatively by assuming bellicose attitudes for whatever reason. One may find oneself in the situation of war and polarize somewhat towards the positive, activating orange, yellow, and then green by heroic actions taken to preserve the mind-body-spirit complex of others. Finally, one may polarize very strongly, this is supposed to be fourth ray, by expressing the principle of universal love at the total expense of any distortion towards involvement in the bellicose actions. In this way, the entity may become a conscious being in a very brief span of your time-space. This may be seen to be what you would call a traumatic progression. It is to be noted that among your entities, a large percentage of all progression has a catalyst. It is to be noted that among your entities, a large percentage of all progression has, as catalyst, trauma. I had to write 2 frowny faces and a sarcastic wonderful for this section. I hate it. I really, really hate it. Because Ross says, war is the fundamental perception of maturing entity. There's a great chance to accelerate in whatever direction is desired. Do you see my face? So yeah, people that are negatively oriented clearly have a lot of ways to advance on their negative shit all the way up to the 4th density through war. Yes. And then people have a positive route too by being heroic and saving other people. Yeah, I got it. And then you've got like the people who refuse to fight because they refuse to want to have to kill anybody else, or, etc. They put themselves against the whole thing in general. And then they also get screwed over because they're stepping out of line or not fighting for their country or whatever. And all of it is trauma, which unfortunately is the large percentage of all progression. It's the biggest catalyst of progressing to the next density. It's frickin' trauma. Trauma causes people to have spiritual awakenings. Is this session over yet? Let's keep going. You just used the term 3rd. You meant to say 4th, right? Yes, we intended green. Our difficulty lies in your perception of the red ray and the violet ray as fixed. Thus, the inner rays are those which are varying and are to be observed as those indications of seniority in attempt to form a harvest. So Raw keeps messing up the order because they don't really think of the red and the violet, the root and the crown, as being energy centers because they're fixed. They don't change. They're we talked about it. Okay. Would the red ray, an intense red ray, be used as an index for seniority, the seniority system of incarnation, as well as the intense violet ray? Partly correct. In the graduation or harvesting to the 4th density positive, the red ray is seen only as being activated. The red ray is seen only as that which, being activated, is the basis for all that occurs in the vibratory levels. The sum of this being the violet ray energy. Okay. So when someone's getting ready to move up to 4th density positive, red is just activated and the violet is the total sum. This violet ray is the only consideration for 4th density positive. So they're only looking at your 4th density positive to see if you're ready to move up. In assessing the harvestable 4th density negative, the intensity of the red as well as orange and yellow rays is looked upon quite carefully, as a great deal of stamina and energy of this type is necessary for the negative progression. It is being extremely difficult to open the gateway to intelligent infinity from the solar plexus center. This is necessary for harvest in the fourth density. So really, if you're moving up to fourth density positive, only your violet ray is assessed, because that's the sum total of all of the energy centers, biases, distortions, etc. Polarization. But in the negative, they have to look at red, orange, and yellow, because you can't access intelligent infinity without the higher chakras, unless your lower ones are like super, super crazy. Is it possible for you to give us an example of our General Patton and tell me the effect that war had on him in his development? The one of whom you speak, known as George, was one in whom the programming of previous incarnations had created a pattern or inertia which was irresistible in its incarnation in your time-space. This entity was of a strong yellow ray activation with frequent green ray openings and occasional blue ray openings. However, it did not find itself able to break the mold of previous traumatic experiences of a bellicose nature. So General George Patton was had many lives full of war, sounds like. This entity polarized somewhat towards the positive in its incarnation due to its singleness of belief in truth and beauty. This entity was quite sensitive, and it felt a great honor duty to the preservation of that which it felt by the entity to be true, beautiful, and in need of defense. So he's trying to keep the world beautiful and true. Wanted to defend it. This entity perceived itself a gallant figure. It polarized somewhat toward negative, but in its lack of understanding the green ray it carried with it, rejecting the forgiveness principle, which is implicit in the universal love, so he wasn't able to forgive. The sum total of this incarnation was a slight increase in positive polarity, but a decrease in harvestability due to the rejection of the law or way of responsibility. That is, seeing universal love, yet still it fought on. So, sounds like he couldn't forgive, even though he really did understand love. He wasn't able to move up. He just ended up with a slight polarity towards the positive. How many freaking laws are there? Law or way of responsibility? We haven't heard that one yet. Okay, do we have enough time to ask if the death almost immediately after the cessation of war of this entity, could that have been so that it could be immediately reincarnated to possibly make harvest? Precisely correct. So, what was Don asking here? If the death almost immediately after the cessation of the war of this entity, could he immediately reincarnate to possibly make harvest? So I think he's asking specifically about General Patton. Could he reincarnate immediately so that he could try to become harvestable? And Ross says yes. Not that he did, but he could. And then I marked one last little thing here. And this is something different that Ross says at the end. One which is all in all. I leave you in everlasting peace. Okay, let's review what we learned in this session. Carla needs a long exercise period and a short exercise period. What it would feel like if you if you penetrated the 8th level of intelligent infinity, and what it might possibly cause you to do. Don had some crazy experience where he felt like he went to a different planet. Karma. That was a huge part of this one that I thought was really important. Talked about karma. Karma, and how it's inertia and how you can break it with understanding, accepting, and forgiveness. Forgiveness being the key. And then Don went through a whole bunch, going more in depth into the different catalysts for growth. And he went through pain, contagious diseases, birth defects, society. Talked about Albert Schweitzer and Martin Luther King. Gadgets and toys. Sports and transportation. Television. And the biggest one was war and trauma. War and trauma. Okay. And then what is looked at as far as the energy centers moving up into fourth density for positive and negative. And then John wanted to know about general pattern. So a weird combination of stuff in this session. I'm really glad about the karma stuff, because even though doing the understanding, accepting, and forgiveness isn't easy, knowing about it is so important. And I hated the part about all the war and the trauma. Yes. So, I guess we shall leave. We shall part ways today on a sad, sour note. But anyway, tell me what you think. Put your questions, comments, concerns, complaints in the comments below, and let's talk about it. What do you think? Thanks for watching this. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. There are 34 videos before this one, and I don't know how many are going to be after, because there is 56 sessions in this book, and then there's a whole nother book. So yeah. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!